Hello. In the last lecture, I tried to present a view of the world that doesn't separate thinking from the world, from reality. A naive view of the matter supposes that there's an objective world out there, and then that we have thinking that is a subjective activity. Thinking is something that just sort of happens inside of our own heads. In the last video, I tried to show the difficulties, and in fact the insurmountable difficulties to a view like that. It really ceases to make sense once we inquire very deeply into it. So I tried to offer another view, another conception of how, what kind of place the world is and what is the relation of thinking to that world. I tried to show the way in which they're sort of, they're inseparable and they everywhere sort of interpenetrate what we think of as the world and thinking. In this as something of a follow-up to the last lecture, I would like to give a sort of, go through a concrete example that maybe can help to show and help to just make a little bit more clear some of the more rather abstract concepts that I was presenting in the last lecture. And so to do that, I have an actual object here, a real object, and it's a bowl on top of the book. The bowl is, well, what I thought we could do is just sort of try to discover and investigate the nature of the bowl, and what I expect our investigation will reveal is that the idea of the bowl itself, the thought of the bowl itself, is something that it can never be separated from the actual bowl that we imagine to exist in reality, and that we trust and that we believe and that we know to exist in reality. Here's the bowl. And so I thought that we could go through a sort of exercise together, and in hopes of, again, really arriving at a concrete experience of what I intended to say when with the notion that that thinking is inextricably woven together with the world, and in fact it's almost the pith and marrow of the world, or even like the lifeblood of the world. Again, this is kind of a shocking proposition, but I hope that with the last lecture and then again with this lecture that I can provide a basis for that and show why it's actually it's almost the only conclusion that we can arrive at. If we take the bowl, you'll just have to take my testimony for it in terms of how it feels. It's a little bit cold to the touch. It seems to be made of brass. It can make a sound when it's wrung. It's hard. Has the color, I think, can be evident to somebody watching the video. And if we just consider the bowl for a moment, I think it will be, well, on the one hand, we have to start to ask the question, how do we know that it's a bowl? And again, we might immediately be tempted to say, well, we can see it with our eyes. But again, as I tried to show in the last lecture, the eyes, so our visual apparatus and all the physiology that goes together with them, they may be in terms of perceiving the bowl as an object, that the eyes may be a necessary condition to perceive the bowl, but by themselves, the eyes are far from a sufficient condition to see the bowl. There are a lot of other things that are necessary as well. One of them, for example, is attention. And we know this because we can look at something and fail to see it. We can direct our eyes to something and fail to see it. And so already we know that there's a quality of mind, or a quality of consciousness, a quality of intelligence, attention, that is among the necessary conditions to see the bowl. And so we've already gone beyond something that can merely be described in terms of physics or anatomy or natural sciences when we think about attention. Proceeding further from that, and this is again something that I touched on in the last lecture, but I think we can develop it further with this concrete example. Going further from that, attention by itself, though, that is also not a sufficient condition to perceive the bowl, because we also know that if I don't know what a bowl is, then I'll be in very much the same situation as one of the blind men when confronted with an elephant. In other words, I may may perceive the tactile and the visual and even the auditory, and it smells a little bit like brass. So all of these sensible, sensual stimuli, that I may even perceive those with my attention and register them in my attention. But just like the blind man and the elephant, if I don't have the organizing idea of a bowl, if I don't have access to that idea through my perhaps prior knowledge, through my ability to basically grasp and enter into the concept of a bowl with my understanding, if I don't have that ability, then no amount and no number of sensible observations of the bowl is going to do anything for me. We can imagine by analogy with the blind man and the elephant that the story presented an account of 6 blind men approaching an elephant from different sides. We can imagine 600 blind men approaching the elephant, and they would still have they would run into the same difficulty, which is that they were unable to move from a perception of features to a perception of the whole being, of which those features were features. They were unable to move from, basically they were unable to marshal the data that they were receiving from their senses, the information, the inputs that they were receiving into their senses. They were unable to order that and to marshal it toward a single idea, a comprehensive idea of the elephant, which would thereby have it would have transformed their mere data, their mere sense perceptions, into evidence for a specific thing. In other words, the idea of the elephant was a necessary condition for those sense percepts to transform those sense percepts into evidence for the existence of that idea, the elephant. In a very similar way, here we have the bull. No amount of again, sensible observation, no matter how careful it was, if I didn't understand the idea of a bull, the concept of a bull, its function, etc., if I had no grasp of that idea, I could never perceive the bull. I would perceive perhaps a shape. I might perceive what it's made of, but I would never perceive the bull. It's very similar. What makes this a bull is the fact that I recognize it as such and that I can use it as such. In some ways, and the same thing it can actually transform the bull into something else. It's a kind of magic almost. The bull immediately becomes, the bull will become, here's the bull, but it becomes a bell the minute that I strike the bull. And it's a sort of, I've reconceived all of those the sense percepts. So all of my sensations that are related to the bull, I have in some way reordered them and ordered them toward a different idea, which is the idea of a bell. And immediately in doing that, they've all sort of realigned themselves towards that different idea. You could imagine different uses for this. A paperweight. I could melt it down and make bullets, musket balls. I could use it as a hat, like Johnny Appleseed with a pot, etc. All of these things, in some way, we discover that even without changing the material configuration of something, that there's an astonishing variety of different ideas that are actually not just afterthoughts. Again, because to go back to the idea of the bowl, we can inquire further and say, this obviously has material constituents. Like, again, it's probably made of brass, so it's like copper and tin. There was elemental copper and tin, but something had to happen for that elemental copper and tin to become a bowl. As I suggested in the last lecture, whatever had to happen, it was essentially a question of the metalworker, the blacksmith's idea of the bowl, finding a way to instantiate or incarnate that idea into matter. If the blacksmith did not know what a bowl was, he or she would have a very difficult time creating one. In other words, what you really have in terms of objects are kind of concrete material instantiations of ideas. By the same token, and this is something of a recapitulation, but said in a slightly different way, it's only because we ourselves then are able to enter into and participate and grasp and understand that same idea that was behind the origin of this bowl in the creator, the artist, the blacksmith's mind. Every time we perceive the bowl, we also participate in that same idea. And so it's not as though that the blacksmith has one idea of the bowl and I have another one, and anyone watching this video each has his or her own idea of the bowl. It's very far from that. We have our own perceptions of the bowl. We share in a single conception of the bowl. So we have various and diverse and manifold perceptions but they are joined, they are united in a single conception. We know this because we can understand one another when we refer to the bowl. We know this because we can argue about the bowl. Again, somebody could say it's a hat. Somebody could say it's a bell. But the fact that we can even understand the argument itself, it presumes our ability to, it presumes a common departure point. If we had no concept of the bowl if we had no connection to the fact that we share the concept of the bowl, we couldn't argue against that concept either, or that experience. And so going further, but then also by going further, reconnecting this to the kind of the initial premise of these two lectures together. A naive view of the world imagines that there's a world and then there's thinking, and it imagines that, again, there's an objective world and thinking is a subjective activity in our heads. The minute we inquire critically into that conception, though, it begins to fall apart. It becomes frayed at the edges first, and then it finally just unravels altogether, because we can recognize with this bowl that, again, just the same way as the blind man and the elephant, every single person who perceives this bowl in terms of perceptions through the senses, so through the eyes, the ears, touch, taste, smell, this is inherently subjective. We can never count on the fact that we will share sensory percepts. And in fact, we can almost assume that we will not share them, because even ourselves, we ourselves, from one moment to the next, in one instant, we no longer share sensory percepts. It's always they're always kind of fluctuating and coruscating. The bowl, from one instant to the next, it catches light a little bit differently. If I throw it across the room, if I toss it, what is it that how can I know that the bowl that leaves my hand is the same bowl that arrives in my hand again? It sounds like such a simple question, but it's only because we sort of take for granted the synthetic and the synthesizing faculty of thinking that joins every moment on the bowl's trajectory. It joins them together, one moment to the next, right? Because to my eyes, it's forms and colors moving, but it's my understanding that's able to recognize those forms and colors moving as basically the signs or the letters even that spell out what's happening as a bowl. That the bowl is that I'm throwing the bowl and catching it again. And so it's through thinking that we're able to link, even for ourselves, join one moment to the next and create a coherent picture of activity. It's also through thinking that we're able to arrive at an intersubjective understanding, the fact that we can all agree that this is a bowl. It's not because we see the same thing through our eyes or touch the same thing through our fingertips. Certainly not in this case. It goes even further through the video. Anybody who's watching this lecture is seeing a recorded, is obviously seeing the lecture recorded, but also reproduced, and it could be anywhere in the world really, and at any time in the world. It's very obvious that that there's no material connection or sensible connection between the bowl that I'm perceiving at this moment and the bowl that anyone else will perceive through the video at another moment. The videos themselves, sometimes they take hours to upload to YouTube and to process them. It takes much longer than I might have imagined before I started doing this. But in any case, we're still able to arrive at a mutual understanding of the bull. Even somebody who's seeing they're certainly not, their eyes are not in connection with the light coming off of the bull right now as they are for me. Rather, you're somehow receiving, you're seeing the bull, but it's mediated through digital media, through the computer screen. So again, there's no possible material connection. And so we have to conclude. We're almost forced to conclude by the evidence that if we are seeking objectivity, if we're seeking objectivity and intersubjectivity, the place to find that is not through the outside, so to speak, through what we see, what we feel, what we touch. And this might be exactly the reverse of what we might naively imagine. But again, I think it's the only conclusion that we can come to. If we're seeking objectivity, the place to find that objectivity is through the thoughts, through the concepts, through the ideas that we share. This also appears in any kind of discussion or argument even. Even if somebody disagrees with us in an argument, nevertheless, we're able to recognize, and even as a condition to argue against them, we've already presumed and we've already just sort of taken for granted and acknowledged the fact that we do share common thoughts, that these ideas are what we can treat objectively. If I'm arguing against somebody, the sounds that I'm making through my mouth are entirely subjective, and it's only in virtue of the common ideas that we share that we're able to agree or disagree on something. And so I hope that that through this more concrete example, I hope that it's in some ways served to maybe approach some of the ideas from the last video from a different side, but also to give them something a more concrete example. And so that's probably a good place to conclude this video. But I hope that again, I hope that together in some way we have that we're gradually, if we take our elephant to be critical thinking in this case, then again we're trying to approach that elephant from many different aspects, from many different angles, and we're doing what we can to ensure that we won't fall into the fallacy of the blind man, and by that we can the way to avoid that fallacy is to always bear in mind that we're trying to arrive at a common idea, a common understanding of critical thinking. And so that's a good place to end this lecture, but I will, not before that I wish everyone the best, and to say that I look forward to continuing this conversation in whatever medium that might be. So farewell to everyone.